Alright guys, the time is now for a showdown between the Vampire Coast, who's going to be led by Grumpy Cat atop his mighty scratching post, and the Dark Elves, who are going to be led by Big Mama Marathi. So without further ado, let's jump right into this match and have some fun. So as far as the build goes, we do have a fairly heavy powder build. In total, we do have two groups of the deck gunners here in the back, which are very good against Dark Elves. So firstly, these bad boys do have 245 range, therefore they're going to be able to outrange Dark Shards, and granted, Shades can sneak up on them and get some really good damage, but for the most part, they're able to outrange most of the standard Archer builds, which are going to be reliant on Dark Shards. On top of that, they do also have Shield Breaker and pretty good armor-piercing values, and Cold Blood Knights are a fairly, I wouldn't say like super common, but they're often used against the Crabs and against Count Noctilus, and it's one of the more traditional anti-large options of the Dark Elves. So you can see there's some Cold Blood Knights here, and I believe there's some on the far side as well. So the deck gunner is very good at taking those guys apart. They're able to break their shields, and I'm pretty sure they have shields, yeah. So they have the shield breaker effect, they have good armor piercing, and honestly, they just generate a lot of value. Now, they can be taken out very quickly. They're incredibly squishy, 2,500 HP, pretty much no defensive stats. I mean, look at that, 5 melee attack, 10 melee defense. Look at that, pretty substantial stuff. They need to babysit them a little bit, and if they do get ambushed, I've seen Dark Elf players actually use Shades, and Vanguard deploy them, sneak up on you, and like kill them in like 1 or 2 volleys. So you need to be very careful, but if used correctly and protected, these guys can do a ton of work. On top of that, we do have two groups of the standard zombie pirate gunnery mobs. So these aren't going to be the handgun variant. These are the pistol variants, which can move and shoot. And they're really good in this style formation. So what you do is you put your main zombies in the front. So the zombie pirate deckhand mobs, and you put the gunnery mobs in the little seams right here. So when the enemy's approaching with witch elves or bleak swords or dread spears, even though some of them do have shields, still they're pretty good targets. These guys have decent volume of fire and honestly just give you that steady pressure. And if you see things like War Hydras or, Marathi's flying over your head on her steed, they can actually shoot her and do some really good work. So yeah, I love these guys in this matchup. On top of that, I do have the black spot here in the back. So I do have one traditional handgun. These guys are great. They have armor piercing, anti-large, and melee. And yeah, they're just really, really durable, solid pick, and they can take apart those high value targets, no problem. Now, the real staple of this build. So probably you're going to struggle against Dark Elf Infantry, Corsairs, and Bleak Swords, and Witch Elves. They can really tear through your zombies quite quick. So it's really important to bring Depth Guard, the standard ones. You don't need to bring the Helpers, of course. So the standard Depth Guard here, you bring 3 of them, and they're pretty much a hard counter against Dark Elf Infantry, with the exception of Harganeth Executioners. Their armor is going to give them, plenty of resistance against like Witch Elves and those high DPS, low armor piercing troops. And more importantly, they're also going to tear them to shreds with their 70 weapon strength right now, which is insane. And they also heal while they're doing it. So these guys are just so damn good against the Dark Elves. I've had so much success with them. Grumpy Cat, of course, we talked about. He's taking some of that Reaper fire, and we do have 2 doggos. So these Scurvy Dogs are also a staple. If you don't bring the Scurvy Dogs, you're going to have a lot of trouble against the Dark Elves. You need them to kind of harass the back line, go after archers. It just gives you battlefield control, which you so often lack with a very slow faction. For my opponent's build, he does have 2 groups of the Reaper Bolt Throwers, which are actually going to do some work against Noctilus. You can see they've already chipped a little bit of HP off him, and I've had to fall back, so my dogs are going to be hunting those things just nonstop. On top of that, he does have Bleak Swords. It looks like Bleak Swords across the entire front line with some Witch Elves. I don't think he has the ROR, so yeah, just going to be standard Witch Elves. Blackheart Corsairs are going to be running pretty deep with Marathi on foot. So Marathi's pretty powerful. She has anti-large, she has armor piercing against Noctilus, she has really good AoE debuffs, and just great magic with Soul Stealer and some other abilities. So very, very good choice there. And he also does have 2 groups of the Cold One Knights. So if I went with a crab build, a lot of people do rushy crab builds. These guys are pretty much a hard counter. And on top of that, the War Hydra is going to be pretty spooky. I mean, this guy's really good against Depth Guard, actually. If you can get the breath attacks like down the line of Depth Guard, it can almost one-shot them, and he also brings some really good armor piercing to the table. So pretty cool stuff. So without further ado, guys, let's get this show on the road. So right now, I'm going to be starting to harass with the dogs. I tried to get around the flanks, but he obviously had ample protection. But a lot of people don't actually expect just frontal assaults. So you just kind of like casually run across the front line here. And when you see an opening and there's a little bit of a separation between the Bleak Swords and, the things they're defending, essentially, you charge in and you can get a ton of damage. So I believe my opponent actually does drop the artillery piece and tries to run, but the doggos are coming in, and these boys are hungry. They're such good boys. They're going to be jumping in here and feasting, and they get some really good damage. They actually kill quite a few of the crew members, and they're able to retreat. So for now, I'm going to be re-advancing Count Noctilus now that I have one of the pieces shut down, and I can simply charge the other one here in just a moment. So these dogs getting massive value, and even if he does fall back, I had another group of dogs waiting in the back just trying to be as annoying as possible. This time he does rush forward with his Bleak Swords and is able to intercept the doggos there, but for the most part, we did a little bit of damage, and it's still kind of stressing your opponent out, right? Like forcing them to micro, and it's kind of putting other things out of position. It's definitely very important if you're playing the Vampire Coast to get good with a Scurvy Dog and just hound harass. It's like using Direwolves or Chaos Poison Warhounds. We're going to be pulling back a little bit. The other dogs in the meantime, everywhere you attack, oftentimes it's going to create another opening, right? So we have another pocket right here where the doggies can slip through. Granted, he has ample defensive units, right? He has Witch Elves and other things that he can kind of rotate, but still we might be able to get in there. At the very least, we're threatening, right? Other group of dogs is going to be trying to slip through here, but alas, I think I get caught by the Hydra. No, it looks like the Hydra doesn't quite catch me. And his bolt throwers are actually doing good damage. He does have them in the spray fire mode, and they're taking out my deck gunners. I do use an Invocation of Nehek from Count Noctilus, and this entire time, Count Noctilus is getting a ton of value. I'm able to pound these Cold One Knights with Count Noctilus, do a ton of damage. We've pretty much taken out one of the Reaper bolt throwers, right? So the dogs had a moment where I was able to get in there, and even though the Bleak Swords were like right on top of them, it wasn't quite enough. And from there, the dogs were able to break those guys off. So the entire time, I'm shooting right now. I'm scooting forward my Zombie Pirate Gunnery mob. So I'm going to just kind of push these guys forward a little bit, start poking the Hydra and some of these other units, and potentially even shoot the Reaper Bolt Thrower. The dogs are still causing problems in the back line. You can see the Cold One Knights are trying to chase him, but the entire time, Count Noctilus is just going to be taking pot shots, which is great. Although I have switched my targets onto the War Hydra, so right now you can see the Zombie Pirate Gunnery mob is going to be advancing, taking some fat, juicy old shots here at the War Hydra, and the dogs, they're getting a little bit tired. These good old boys, they're out of steam. So I think I actually lapsed there for a second. No, I actually ended up attacking the Hydra just to try and pin him down. He was actually shaken, so I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I can get like a really kind of sneaky break right here and chase him off the battlefield. Nonetheless, though, the other Zombie Pirate Gunnery mob is able to advance forward and take out that Reaper Bolt Thrower. So those guys definitely paying some pretty good dues. In the meantime, the Witch Elves and the Blackheart Corsairs and everyone's going to be advancing. My other dogs, I'm kind of like, okay, the battle's about to start. He's sending everything forward. Let's go ahead and just send the dogs into the Reaper Bolt Thrower. I know they're going to go down to the Witch Elves, but look at this. It's blobbing up everything, right? The Bleak Swords, the Scurvy Dogs, the Cold One Knights are all doing this, and that's taking so much pressure off my main army, which is very, very nice. In the meantime, it looks like the Bleak Swords are kind of pushing. I do fall back with the Zombie Pirate Gunnery mob, making sure to send in the Berserkers, the Depth Guard, and these guys do a ton of work against Bleak Swords. They're probably not even going to lose a single model. So they charge in, and they're going to start hitting like trucks. And man, they are just such a cool looking unit. Look at those Depth Guard. They're going to get in there. You can see the Bleak Swords lose a ton of models on the initial charge. They do have a charge bonus of 27, which is no joke. And in a matter of seconds, those guys will be cleaned up. Deck Gunners, in the meantime, have switched their sights onto the War Hydra, and the groups that were being focus fired, I was able to heal up pretty well with the Invocations of Nehek. And Big Mama Marathi is going to be leading her battalion here in the front, and I will be summoning some more zombies here to kind of inundate these Witch Elves. And I also do fall back with the Zombie Pirate Gunnery mob, and I'm going to be engaging with the Halberds. In the meantime, over here in the flank, the Witch Elves have engaged, but the Depth Guard are just such a hard counter. I mean, they just mulch these guys down. It's such a good choice against the Dark Elves. It kind of works against Hiles a little bit too, but the Hiles do have more like heavy infantry with like AP, like white lines and stuff. Soul Blight's going to be going down, giving the Dark Elves a little bit of a buff to their damage here, but now it's going to be a little bit tricky as we're going to form ranks, and the guns are going to start shooting into the Witch Elves and the Corsairs. I mean, Corsairs have a little bit of mitigation against their guns, but the Witch Elves certainly don't. Over here on the other side, the Depth Guard are just doing their job. They're kind of cleaning up the Bleak Swords right here. Some of the guns are getting ready to shoot at the Hydra, but the Hydra is going to be jumping in, and this is where it's really going to shine. The Hydra is going to be a masterclass tool at taking out Depth Guard. Granted, yeah, I don't think it was able to get a breath attack because it was being attacked by those deckhand mobs, but it's definitely a little bit beat up. The bounce up power is relatively even, but it looks like it's starting to teeter in my favor a little bit. In the back line, he does attack with some Cold One Knights who partially get caught on the Zombie Pirate deckhand mobs. They're also going to get caught by this other group. They're being pincered in, and that is a lot of money out of the gates here. And Count Noctilus is able to come back there and pegulate them to death, which is going to be good. Now, in the mainline fight here, I do get a big Invocation of Nehek, which is able to hit the Depth Guard. And honestly, there's, I think, 2 groups of Depth Guard here. Maybe there's just 1, but that's going to be enough to just kind of swarm these Witch Elves. You can see they're pretty much fully surrounded. Yeah, and they're not going to be able to take the beating here. The Depth Guard coming in the back, just hordes and hordes of zombies who are really getting that maximum effectiveness from the Invocation of Nehek are just doing so much work. Hydra, in the meantime, is going to be advancing forward. I do overcast the Gunnery mob, or the, what's it called, the Drowned Dead, which summons a group of Gunnery mobs. And they're just going to kind of line up their pistols and start gunning down this Hydra. So the Hydra's definitely not having a good time. Big breath attack coming in, which does roast my black spot back here. But now there's going to be a ton of firepower coming in as this Gunnery mob's going to shoot. This other group here, they're just all going to be unleashing all their ammunition into the Hydra. And I believe Count Noctilus is shooting it as well, so its regeneration helps a little bit. But that's going to be all she wrote for the Dark Elves as my opponent does bow out there. So that is the build from my Vampire Coast guide, which was a little bit delayed simply because I want to wait for the Festog update to come out because it's going to change the cost of some units as well as their power levels. So I'm going to have to re-update a couple builds, but this build for the most part is going to be completely unchanged. It's very good against Dark Elves. I don't know if I've lost with it yet against Dark Elves. I'll have to go ahead and take a look, but I think it's pretty damn strong. Front line does its job, right? But when they advance, they're going to be taking Withering Fire from the Gunnery mobs. The Deck Gunners are really good at kind of utility, just a utility unit, taking out Cold One Knights and big targets. And yeah, Noctilus is just such a beast, but the Depth Guard is just, as long as they're not taking that like brunt charge, right? If you charge them in first, instead of the Zombie Pirate Deckhand mobs, for example, you know, your opponent's going to be able to get charges with the Witch Elves. They're going to get their charge bonus. They're going to get that initial burst. They're going to have Marathi support. But if you use them as like a bit of a follow-up unit and put them against the weaker targets, kind of use them as like a predatory unit where you prey on the weak. You go after the Bleak Swords and the Dread Spears that are isolated, kill them in like 10 or 15, 20 seconds. And from there, you collapse in on the other targets that are busy, you know, being tar pitted by your Zombie Pirate Deckhand mobs. Yeah, it's a pretty damn strong build. But again, had the dog play not been good in the beginning, it could have been a very different game. Like, had my dogs not been able to shut down the Reaper bolt throwers, over the course of that like 2 or 3 minutes of just straight harass, he might have been able to shoot down Count Noxos with the bolt throwers. The spray might have been able to kill my deck gunners. It could have been a very different game. So again, in this build, it's very important that you're on top of your dog play. And honestly, it might even be worth it to cut like one Death Guard and just get a couple Fellbats, like 2 or 3 groups of Fellbats, or maybe even another Scurvy Dog. It is very, very important. As far as my opponent's build, it was pretty good. I just think the bolt throwers, like having those guys be taken out by the dogs in the beginning, plus the withering fire that Count Noctilus did have on the Cold Stone Knights, I think that was pretty game breaking for sure. So very well played to my opponent Falcon. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this game. And today, guys, we do have a good old 2-for-1. They're going to be jumping over to the second game here, which was, I think it was a matchup between Vampire Coast and Dwarves, where we use Luther Harkin and Lord of the Deeps. So we're not going to be using the Drowned Dead Invocation. We're going to be using Vangeist Revenge and some Angry Crab Summons. So thank you guys so much for joining, and let's jump on over to game 2. All right, guys, so now we're back with game 2, which is going to be a showdown between the Vampire Coast, who's going to be led by Luther Harkin, the Dwarves, who are going to be led by the High King Thorgrim. So without further ado, let's jump right into this match and have some fun. It's a bit of an unorthodox build. Typically, I have a little bit of a different style against the Dwarves, but in this match, I wanted to go super wide with guns and actually try and blob up my opponent using a couple monsters. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be sending in the big crab first. The Rotting Leviathan's going to move into the Dwarf ranks very recklessly. I'm like, I want it to be surrounded by Slayers and Warriors and just taking all the missile pressure. And from there, we're going to be using the good old Vangeist Revenge. So like I said in the previous cast, we are indeed going to be using the Lore of the Deep. So I don't know where the caster is out. He's actually hiding in the trees with Luther Harkin. So very sneaky business. So as far as these spells go, we do have the Vangeist Revenge, which is a massive just AoE damage spell. Well, I don't know if it's like AoE, it's more like a cone, but it hits very hard. And even though the Dwarves do have magic resist, it still can chunk them very badly. And a lot of people aren't going to be expecting this. On top of that, we do have the Crab Summons, and that is pretty much it. So whenever you're, picking your Winds of Magic, or your spells, I should say, before the match, you always want to make sure there's somewhat of a healthy curve because you only have so much Winds of Magic to work with. Therefore, that's why most people don't bring 5 spells. So in this case, you can see this one's really expensive and so is this one. So that's all I'm going to be bringing because I know I'll probably only get a couple casts off over the course of the whole game. So Vampire Fleet Captain with Deep. Luther Harkin on foot is really good against Dwarves. He has a massive armor-piercing pistol, so you basically just kite the Dwarf Lords, you pick them off. And melee is not a pushover either. He does, of course, have the Disrupted, which lowers their physical resist, which is actually pertinent in the melee fights. And yeah, I think he's a really good choice against the Dwarves. He's a small target, he has good armor-piercing, and he does have the hunger to heal himself in melee. So you don't really have to rely on his invocation to heck as much. So that's going to be pretty cool. We have the Deckhand Robs in the front just to kind of absorb the initial charge of the Dawi. We do have the big, you guys ever been to like one of those like used car lots where they have like the big wavy arm guys? I totally feel like that's what the Mournfuls are. But anyways, he's here. He does have a arm, bonus for his infantry. He has really good armor piercing. He causes terror. But more importantly, he slows the Dwarves down, which they're already pretty slow, but this makes them even slower with minus 36% speed. So you throw him in the front line, you let him target those guys, and from there, we're going to be going ham with our guns. We have the black spot, we have a massive gun line, so we're going to be trying to put a ton of pressure on these guys. And in the back, we do also have 2 deck gunners, which are also very good against Dawi. These guys have great armor piercing, and they do also have the shield breaker, which lowers missile parry by 24. Not sure about the actual translation of that value, but it's got to be pretty good against shields, right? That's pretty much it. So we're just going to be trying to blob up our opponent, use Vangeist Revenge and our gun line to take them to pieces. For my opponent's force, he has a couple groups of gyrocopters with brimstone guns, which actually really aren't bad against like big armored monsters. So Rotting Leviathans, Necrofex Colossus, he's going to be able to do some pretty good work, and of course the bombs can be used. But I do have a lot of answers. I have a ton of these gunnery mobs here, which is going to be very scary for the gyrocopters. For his main line, he does have Longbeards, Dwarf Warriors, just a massive wide line, which is always pretty good. And he does have 3 groups of the Quarrelers. So Quarrelers over here as well. Actually, Rangers, and it's going to be Rangers or Quarrelers there. So 2 Quarrelers and 1 Ranger. In the back, he does have High King Thorgrim, a couple of groups of Miners, and it looks like he does have the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass and Longbeards in the far back. So definitely going to be a fierce fight. In the beginning, I'm just going to be sending in the Angry Crab Boy. I basically just want him to tar pit, but I think my opponent was pretty green on that. But the big crab slap coming in with the steel crab claw, he's able to slap up a lot of those dwarves, definitely doing some pretty good work. Now, it didn't do the most damage, but he can actually, over the course of a long fight, really crunch things. And he does have armor-piercing shotguns on his back. Captain Swingy Arms here is going to be jumping in, and he's definitely going to be doing some good work against these Longbeards. But he still is getting through with some stuff. My opponent not falling for the tar pit. You can see he just puts 1-1, and he keeps advancing everything else. But the guns are going to start shooting. So my massive gun line hammering into the dwarves, but their shields really paying dues right now, not taking a ton of damage. And I also realized that I'm a little bit line of sight blocked. So that was a big mistake, not looking closely at my deployment. So even if there's like a little hill that can line of sight block guns, you have to be very careful. So sending in the zombie pirate gunnery mobs right now. Over here, I do summon some crabs, and this is the prime time situation, right? Longbeards here, we do have Longbeards and Dwarf Warriors. I summon some crabs, the gyrocopters are shooting in, and it looks like they're trying to snipe out my caster, which isn't a bad choice. But the crab is just rampaging right now. He doesn't have any slayers, just very wide army. He does have some missile pressure, and the Oath of Vengeance is going to be lowering melee defense, but that crab is having a field day. Now, this is where Vanguy's Revenge is going to be coming in just a moment. We're going to be casting right here, the Lord of the Deep caster and Luther, having a good old time in my gun line, just unleashing hell on those gyro bombers, or gyrocopters, doing some really, really good work. Over here, my zombies, of course, are starting to falter, but, we got Ronnie Brown here who's going to be pimp slapping some of those dwarves, and here it comes. So, it wasn't the best cast. I should have had it a little bit closer, but let's go ahead and watch the HP. So, these ones are, yeah, let's just take note. Take a little bit of a mental note there. And that does some pretty good damage. Not as good. My angling was a little bit poor, but it was still a pretty fun spell, and I was able to really chunk down Longbeards. Down about like 20-30%, give or take. My summon crabs are holding pretty firm. They are taking some missile pressure back here from the Rangers, so they're going to be dissipating here in a moment. But the big angry crab's kind of holding. And now that my backline is compromised, and the dwarves, of course, are a very slow faction, I'm going to be scooting in just every direction. These guys are falling back here, these ones here, these guys back here. These guys are going to be going back in this area. And that's going to force my opponent to kind of chase me with his limited resources, while the crab and, Ronnie Brown and Luther Harkin are all fighting in melee. And Luther really isn't a pushover in melee. He can do some work with his little sword he's got there, whatever it's called. All Hands Ahoy here is going to be popped as well, giving some leadership and armor-piercing damage, and the Morngul Haunter definitely having a very good time. Now, the dwarves are going to be able to advance a little bit, but they're going to be taking withering fire from the zombie pirate gunnery mobs. Duck gunners in the back still shooting and just having a jolly old time, and Luther up in the front is going to be going after Thorgrim. So Thorgrim was a little bit isolated here. I was like, you know what, I'm going to use all my abilities. Oh my goodness, he got pushed. So I Hornswoggle him, puts down his defensive stats pretty hard, and the crab is just laying a whooping on him. Luther Harkin, I don't want him to get too involved over here. I figure he might get surrounded or kind of focus fired by these archers. So now I'm going to be doing a bit of a tactical retreat, just falling back here, and basically I'm using the Morngul Haunter to slow the dwarves down. It puts their speed down to 17, and from there they just are so much slower than the zombies who have 23 speed. I can just kind of kite them and shoot them to pieces. And whenever he does advance, I'm able to kind of just pick them apart from multiple angles. I mean, these miners trying to get some blasting charges, but man, they're just taking volleys and volleys of firepower. Over here, my opponent does get a good engagement. Unfortunately, these Dwarf Warriors are able to catch the black spot, but surprise, it's the black spot. These guys actually have armor-piercing kind of bayonets on the ends of their guns. So in reality, they're probably going to be able to beat these dwarves, considering they have twice the HP, they're very healthy, and black spot really catches people off guard in so many different matchups. Deck Gunners in the back just shooting into the range tool, so we're trying to trade with the Quarrelers, who do have shields, so they're a pretty ideal target for the Deck Gunners here. Luther Harkin, in the meantime, just using him as kind of a body up here to just distract these guys, and he is going to be shooting his pistol. I think he was shooting at Thorgrim there for a moment. But the big Morngul Haunter's doing a pretty good job just kind of slapping up these dwarf infantry. And it looks like High King Thorgrim in the back is going to be taken out by the big angry crab. This thing's just been doing a ton of work. And my opponent definitely had some decent answers for my guns, but he really just didn't have too many answers for the monsters. I really think against Vampire Coast, you need to bring a couple Slayers, because Slayers are obviously very good against Mornguls, or good against Morngul Haunters, and Rotting Leviathans, and from there, it looks like Thorgrim's going to be returning to the halls after the crab has done its job. So he's able to drop the atomic butt slam right here on the Quarrelers. Those guys are going to be shaken up. And from here, you can see the dwarves are looking pretty beat up. I have another crab summon, Luther Harkin with his sword here. He's going to be fighting off these Longbeards. And my opponent doing a good job just force pathing through. So he knows I'm trying to tar pit him. He keeps pushing everything through. The Longbeards are going. The Warriors of Dragonfire Pass are going. They're being crossfired. So everywhere they go, just kind of being picked off from different angles. And it looks like the dwarves are getting relatively close to army losses here. And you can see that the Morngul Haunter is doing a great job cleaning up the back line. The Brimstone Guns have done a little bit of work against the Rotting Leviathan, but still, it hasn't been enough, and they're pretty much just hard countered by the massive gun line I have. Over here, this group of zombie pirate gunnery mobs is being taken out, but the Black Spot, like I said, was able to beat those Dwarf Warriors. They were just so much healthier. I think if a full health group of Dwarf Warriors had gone in there, they probably would have won, but in that situation, I was able to do pretty well for myself. Luther Harkin and the Fish Caster here, the Vampire Fleet Captain, are able to clean up these Longbeards. It looks like they're going to break due to army losses. That's going to be all she wrote. So well played to my opponent. It was definitely a bit of an experimental build. I kind of was inspired by it for my campaign, because in the campaign, I just basically got monsters. I tar pitted my opponents. Granted, it's easier with AI because they're going to stick on something and you can really abuse those big spells. But the gun line did really good. They actually were solid. My opponent had some answers to them, but I felt like they weren't able to kind of get in that comfortable position and, just having that Overwatch fire from the Deck Gunners. And really the crab just running rampant was able to really shut down the back line. But definitely some fun stuff. Like, had I gone with, let's say, for example, Depth Guard and Rotting Prometheans and gone with a bit more of an aggressive build, I think that, his Brimstone Guns would have torn apart my Prometheans. But in this case, just having all these guns, like literally 6 guns, is going to be really tough and pretty much just nullifies the effectiveness of the Gyrocopters. So my opponent obviously trying something a little bit different, something new, but it just didn't work out too well against the guns. But yeah, I don't know. This is a pretty decent anti-dwarf build. A couple things I might change, although I guess if they have Slayers, you can really focus fire them down with the guns, but I would probably cut, I don't know, I would cut one of the deck gunners maybe, or I just would want to free up some money in one of the handguns and get some scurvy dogs and fellbats and things like that. Fellbats are going to shut down gyrocopters, scurvy dogs are going to harass the back line. It's very important. So those would probably be the micro changes I would make. But as far as the dwarf build goes, let's go ahead actually and jump out to the custom selection lobby. We're going to take a look at a build I would suggest for dwarves against the Vampire Coast. So first and foremost, you can use High King Thorgrim. He's not a bad choice. A little bit of a big target for the guns and different things like that. I do think the Rune Lord is probably the optimal choice, simply because he's able to really take down, although I guess the Rune of Wrath and Ruin isn't like super intense, but it's pretty good against like guns and Black Spot and Depth Guard if they mix those in. But for now, we can just go with, even like Belagar isn't bad here, or Standard Dwarf Lord, but I think we're going to go with the Standard Dwarf Lord. As far as items go, we can get the Star Metal plate, and we don't really need the Iron Warden's fun business there. We're going to get the Runesmith, so they're pretty good combatants, right? They give you a good anchor, and do we need the leadership buff? We really don't. You basically just use them as a Rune of Wrath and Ruin, just to kind of be conducive to that very, very like grindy style of play, right? On top of that, I do like having a couple Longbeards and the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. These guys do a great job. They just kind of hold things in place. They have shields, and I do like Miners of Blasting Charges. So I get 4 of those. Usually I Vanguard them out front, and they're really close to the opponent's army. They can drop Blasting Charges. Those guys do a ton of work. And then I actually Vanguard the Bugman's Rangers behind them. So Bugman's Rangers are very, very good in this matchup. On top of that, I recommend a couple Thunderers. 1 or 2 groups is usually going to be fine. Bugman's Rangers can do quite a bit of work in shutting down missiles, especially with Vanguard play. Thunders are able to take out the crabs with really solid focus fire, and from here, you can get a couple groups of Slayers. So you get the Dragonback Slayers as well as these guys. And to protect your back line, you don't have to worry so much, because what you're going to do is you Vanguard the Miners, then you put the Bugman's Rangers behind your Vanguard so they can start shooting right away, and then from there you have your Longbeards back there, your Thunders in the back, and you can pretty much just get a couple Miners in the back to like just help out a little bit. You can even like cut one of these or move one of these into the back line. And a build like this is going to be pretty strong. You have ample protection, you have answers against guns, you have answers against and Thunders honestly trade pretty well with enemy powder units. So you have a lot of answers. You don't really need a powerful, like hard-hitting Lord. Granted, Noctiles can be troublesome, but that's what the Thunders and Slayers are for. So anyways, very well played to my opponents. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this 2-for-1. It had been some time since I put up Vampire Coast videos. I know some of you guys got sick of them. Unfortunately, they're like one of my favorite factions to play, and also probably my best faction right now. So there's going to be a little bit of Vampire Coast coming on, especially if I start playing. There's going to be, I don't want to spoil that yet. There's some fun stuff coming. But anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and we will see you guys next time. Take care.